Hello and welcome to Conversations with Ruth. I am Ruth. I am also known as Notorious RVG. During the time I worked with ACLU, I encountered legal aid attorneys and was always impressed with their dedication and good work. I realized that I do not know much about legal aid of North Carolina. I have wondered what legal aid really is. How is legal aid able to serve all those that are eligible for its services? That legal aid not only provides services in specific areas, but to target populations, such as veterans, seniors, Native Americans, and victims of trafficking. Equally important is what are the services legal aid provides? Well, to answer those questions, I ask that you join me in a series of interviews about getting to know legal aid of North Carolina. I promise you that I and you together, we will learn what legal aid is and what services it provides. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about the special projects of legal aid of North Carolina, specifically the Eviction Diversion program, one in Durham and one in Charlotte. The goal of these two projects is similar: to help clients avoid eviction judgments and reduce the consequences of an eviction judgment. Well, to expand on what these projects do, we are joined by Mr. Peter Gilbert from the Durham Legal Aid and Mr. Isaac Sturgill, supervising attorney in Charlotte Legal Aid. Let's start, Mr. Gilbert. First, my description was a little bit broad. Is there anything else we need to add? The projects to avoid eviction judgments, is that correct?
That's correct. We have really two goals in our outcomes for our clients. One is to help them stay in place, if possible, to avoid the displacement. And the other is to avoid the judgment on their record, which will harm their ability to find safe, affordable, and habitable housing in the future.
Right. And that's what you mean by avoiding the consequences.
That's right. So there are consequences both to the displacement and to the judgment itself.
Exactly.
And so in some cases we can avoid both, and in other cases perhaps the tenancy is not sustainable, the client's never going to be able to afford to live there. If we can negotiate a solution where at least they don't have the judgment on their record, that can be a win. And in still other cases, we may not get involved until after the judgment is a final judgment that can't be appealed, but we might still be able to negotiate something that will allow them to stay put. So we have these two separate goals, and in some cases we can achieve one or the other or both.
Is that similar to the Charlotte project?
It is similar, and I think in both projects there's a third consequence too that we try to prevent, and that's for subsidized tenants. So tenants that have a rental subsidy that's attached to their unit, oftentimes if they have an eviction judgment entered against them, they'll also lose their eligibility for that subsidy program.
I see. Well, and how did you accomplish that goal when you're working in the field with clients?
Well, so part of the
What do you do?
Well, we go to court. We'll represent the tenants in small claims court or district court during the eviction proceedings and assert whatever defenses or counterclaims they may have. We also represent them in administrative proceedings. So if they're risking losing their housing subsidy, there's due process involved with that, and there's a hearing where we can go and try to prevent that subsidy termination. And also, we will negotiate, like Peter was talking about, with landlords directly to see if we can reach a resolution, and a lot of times we're able to settle the cases as well.
And that is similar also in Durham?
That's very similar to how we work in Durham. We're also lucky in Durham that we have a partnership with the county's Department of Social Services, and they have some expanded emergency rental assistance for participants in our program. So in some cases where we wouldn't otherwise be able to work out a solution with the landlord, we're now able to do so because of the expanded charitable assistance that the county has made available.
So what does that actually mean? Do you help with payment of the rent or other expenses?
We don't help with the payment of the rent, but the county will. And so there was some existing emergency rental assistance. And then when we launched the program, the county committed an additional pot of money that was less restricted. So previously, rental assistance had only been available for the most part to elderly and disabled households or households with children, but working age adults without children were mostly turned away. And so now we have a little bit more room to negotiate solutions in cases that otherwise previously would have resulted in displacement, if not a judgment.
And I understand that that's unique for the Durham project, that part of the services.
We have an organization in Charlotte called Crisis Assistance Ministry, and so Crisis will give rental assistance as well. And we do have a partnership with Crisis that we've developed over time to where we can do referrals for our clients directly to their office, and then they'll usually respond within 48 hours. And oftentimes, if there's no legal remedy available and it just takes a few $100s to remedy it, they'll pitch in the money so we can avoid eviction that way.
Is there any specific criteria to take a client through that process? I hear you mention about the potential of maintaining the tenancy.
That's one of the things that they look at. In some ways, I think because it's this pot of money anyway is a new program. The previous county money they had a bunch of different funding sources with very specific requirements, and some people would qualify for one and not another. With this pot of money, I think they're still developing what the restrictions may be, because there's a much greater need than there is funding. So it started out sort of completely unrestricted, and then now they may be adding additional restrictions to try to make sure that their money has the most impact and is really going to have a sustainable impact. So one of the things they look at, for example, is the tenancy sustainable? And if the tenant can't show that they're going to be able to pay next month's rent, then they're probably not going to be eligible for the assistance.
And how do the residents of the area know about your services in Durham and Charlotte?
Well, that's actually part of what's been a big push for us, is trying to get out into the community more and let people know about our services. So we did receive some additional funding from Mecklenburg County, and we used that to double our staff size. So we doubled the amount of attorneys and housing paralegals that we had. And so we had enough staff in addition to our regular intake, we started looking at other methods for intake. So we've done a couple things. One of the things that we did is that we spoke with the clerk of court in Mecklenburg County, and also with a prominent landlord's attorney who was willing to work with us on this. And we got them to agree initially, the landlord's attorney, to send out a flyer with all of his eviction complaints that had our contact information on it, and some information about just basic tenants' rights. And so that attorney started sending out that flyer with all of the eviction complaints and summons that he was filing for his firm, and he has about 80% of the market for representation for landlords. So there's a significant number of complaints being sent out. And so we did that, and then that number, we set up a special hotline with the CIU to where they can call in, and then those cases would be funneled into our local office, and we could pick up representation on those cases. Eventually, that was working well enough to where we went to the clerk of court in Mecklenburg County, and we said, will you do it with all of them? Not just this attorney who's doing it willingly, but will you send these flyers out with every single summary adjustment case that's filed?
Let me interrupt you. Are you saying that when the individual receives the summons and complaint, there is a notice attached about your existence?
It's served with
that
the summons.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, so it's like a bright green piece of paper, and it's got the hotline number up at the top. It's got some basic information about court and some basic defenses for tenants, and it says, if you'd like to see if Legal Aid can help, give us a call. So, and
You do the same thing?
We do the same since I think we started getting ours out in August of 2017. Our piece of paper is yellow. But otherwise, it's
quite a difference, right?
Much the same. The one difference, because of our partnership with the Department of Social Services, the first point of referral in our program right now is DSS, where their social workers will screen someone both for emergency rental assistance and then refer them on to Legal Aid of North Carolina through the central intake unit. I think about 2/3 of the cases in our eviction diversion program are coming through that referral stream, are coming from the flyer that gets served with the summons and complaint. And then we've also worked to develop relationships, as they have in Charlotte, with various nonprofit and charitable direct service providers and with the government agencies. So the city inspectors send us a fair number of cases. The Durham Human Relations Commission, that is responsible for investigating claims of housing discrimination, they send us a fair number of cases. I get them sometimes just straight from elected officials or from pastors.
Right.
We have a weekly courthouse clinic, so we're physically in the courthouse for a drop-in clinic every week. We're looking at expanding that. We do twice monthly presentations at local homeless shelters about the program.
You do the same?
We do a lot of the same stuff. So we've also started a clinic, and this is with the cooperation of the clerk of court, our chief district court judge, and also the 4 civil magistrates in Mecklenburg County. We set up a meeting with them and talked to them about the idea of doing this clinic at the courthouse. And we actually found a judge from Massachusetts who has a housing court over there that he helped start, and is into like alternative dispute resolutions and on-the-spot representation and creative solutions to avoiding evictions. And he actually was willing to do a Skype call with the magistrates and explain to them how their process works. And so we found that they were interested in that, and so we were doing the same thing, and we're also doing it once a week now, where we'll have a paralegal set up with a laptop in a conference room at the courthouse. We'll sit in the courtroom, the magistrate will call the docket, and then the magistrate will say, if you're here and you're a tenant, and if you're being evicted, and if you'd like to talk with an attorney from Legal Aid to see if they can help you, let me know, and then I'll give you an opportunity to step outside and talk with them. And so they'll follow us outside, we'll do the intake on the spot, and if they're eligible, we'll sit down with them, we'll give them some advice about their case. Sometimes if there's an easy defense, yesterday we did the clinic, and one of our attorneys, Oshana Hunter, saw a defense that she could recognize right away, and she represented them there that same morning and got the case dismissed.
Well, and if you're successful, I imagine you have a large volume of interested individuals. And I have to emphasize, different from other special projects, you're not statewide. This is only Durham City or Durham County.
Well, our funding for our additional attorneys in this program is limited in some ways to the city of Durham, which is where most of the renters in Durham County live.
Right.
But our office covers Durham and 6 other more rural counties, and we continue to do similar work, housing and eviction cases in those counties as well.
But it's limited then to those areas, and you're limited.
We're similar, instead of the city funding us, the Mecklenburg County government is funding us.
Okay. And we are talking about individuals that have received a summons and complaint in eviction. Any other kind of individual, for example, just a notice of termination?
Well, I was just talking with Peter. One of the things I'm interested about with Peter's program is he's told me that sometimes now, the word's got around and he'll have landlords or tenants call them before it even gets to court.
Okay.
We're working to expand that. So that when we called it an eviction diversion program, that was our original goal, was to try to reduce the number of filings, save the court costs for the landlords, save the costs to the court and the sheriffs for serving all these summons, and to try to resolve these issues that can be resolved outside of court. We're seeing, I think, about 1/5 at this point of the cases that we closed in the first quarter, we resolved pre-filing. Some of those are coming from DSS, even though they didn't get served yet with the notice. People have gone there for emergency rental assistance, and the DSS social workers have sent them to us. They'd like to send more. We're limited at this point by our capacity. We're doing about 50% more cases than we planned to do with the funding and staff that we have. And so we would like to expand that area of work.
Yeah. And I imagine that these individuals have to be eligible, similar to eligibility for Legal Aid of North Carolina?
That's right, yeah. Whether we're at the courthouse clinic or they're calling through the hotline, or in Charlotte, we also have our own local intake there. We get a lot of traffic through our local intake as well. They all have to meet the same eligibility criteria.
We're very fortunate in that we partner with the Duke Civil Justice Clinic, and this program has been a collaboration from the beginning with Duke University Law School's Civil Justice Clinic. And so they have agreed to take those cases that come in who are not eligible for legal aid assistance. And so if someone is not eligible because of their income maybe slightly in excess of our guidelines, or their immigration status is such that we can't represent them, Duke has taken those cases. So in Durham, nobody is being turned away from representation.
Wonderful. How about?
Well, we do have a Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy has an attorney who can represent tenants who we can't represent because of their citizenship status. But we don't have right now a firm that'll pick up people that are just over income, though.
Yeah. And the funding is generally county and city funding, and then legal service funding. Is that?
I think that's correct. I think we also have a grant from the Barrs Foundation that helps a little bit
To support them.
to support our work. But most of the funding is the legal aid funding, and then we have city funding as well that I think covers about half of our staff. And
We're about the same right now. So our about half our staff is funded just through our regular legal aid LSC funding, and then the other half is done by the county. Although the county has asked us recently, if we could take even more people on. So and they've also recently provided us with a new office space that we're moving into as well, because we literally ran out of room to put people on the project. So there's at least the possibility that for the Charlotte office, we may get even more staff moving forward in the next fiscal year.
And finally, I haven't asked about numbers, but I imagine that you have hundreds of people coming to receive your services. Do you have any idea how many you have served?
I can tell you, because I ran a report for a county grant last week, so I can tell you that a typical quarter for us before this project started and we got the increased funding, we may close on a good quarter, maybe 15, 20 cases a month, maybe 60 a quarter or something like that. I know that the first quarter of this project, when we were getting up and running, it was 90 something. It jumped up after we had our full staff in the second quarter to I think 171 cases that we closed. This last quarter, we got backlogged. We opened a ton of stuff, but we were so busy, we didn't get everything closed that we could. So we had 110 closed last quarter, but we had another 79 that went into pre-closing last quarter. So had we closed everything that was ready, it would have been 189 or something like that. So
Wonderful. Great work. And I'm terribly sorry, we have run out of time. It was wonderful to have you here. And I think this information is very important for the public and the legal aid community. Thank you again, both.
thank you.
Thank you.